Yet another Kashmiri Hindu, Rahul Bhatt, was killed last week by terrorists. To send out the message loud and clear that they will not tolerate any attempts by Hindus to return and resettle in the Kashmir Valley. Though there has been a persistent attempt to deny Kashmiri Hindu genocide by the majority community in the valley, as well as the Indian media, government, and even some Kashmiri Pandits themselves, reality has a strange way of knocking on our doors. The Kashmir Files released earlier this year and did exceedingly well at the box office. It's a fabulous movie. The cinematography is splendid, the actors have delivered superlative performances, and the background music especially is haunting. But these are not the primary reasons the movie has done so well. The main reason for its commercial success, I believe, is that it speaks the undiluted bitter truth about the genocide of Kashmiri Hindus. And the film calls out the long-standing effort by the perpetrators of the genocide to deny it. Denial of genocide is in fact the final unmistakable attribute that helps us recognize the act of genocide itself. Kashmir Files, in more than one instance in its plot, reiterates the point that what Hindus went through in Kashmir in 1990 was not some self-inflicted exodus called migration, but a brutal genocide. The power of cinema is such that many Kashmiri Pandits, including me, have received calls from school friends, old neighbors, and ex-colleagues expressing solidarity with what we went through, and even going to the extent of apologizing for not being sensitive enough. The film has received appreciation from none other than the Prime Minister himself, implying that the PM is deeply moved and recognizes what our community went through in 1990. But well after endorsing the movie and taking pictures with the film crew, he visited the state of Jammu and Kashmir and completely, entirely avoided the mention of Kashmiri Hindus in his speeches and interactions. This is not the first time he has done such a thing, but one would have thought that after appreciating the movie, maybe he would acknowledge our existence. But that would be too much to ask from a politician, for reasons I don't want to get into here. So we were talking about cinema. Cinema can cut through all the mental haze and speak straight to the heart. But it cannot do more than that. It cannot teach us politics and law. It cannot teach us to think clearly. It can only move us emotionally and inspire us to act. How we act would be a function of our intellectual clarity, strategic acumen, and wisdom. It seems that the Kashmir Files has indeed inspired Hindus to take action. But the action that they are taking is to go to Kashmir for vacation. Truly amazing. In other news, one member of parliament, Mr. Vivek Tankha, has tabled a private member's bill to facilitate the return of Kashmiri Hindus to the valley. It is titled Kashmiri Pandits Recourse, Restitution, Rehabilitation and Resettlement Bill 2022. It seems that Mr. Tankha is being advised by the same group of Kashmiri Pandits who were instrumental in getting the Kashmir Files made. And it is so ironic that while the film so fearlessly articulates the need to recognize the Kashmiri Hindu genocide, which has been going on for centuries, this bill manages to do exactly the opposite. That is, it denies the genocide by implicitly advocating for what in legal parlance is called restorative justice, or reconciliation between victims and perpetrators. In a brilliant technical analysis of the bill, Panun Kashmir's legal advisor, Mr. Tito Ganju, has demonstrated that the bill is actually a cop-out and tantamounts to a denial of genocide. As he explains in the video, genocide can be denied literally by saying that there were no targeted killings of Hindus, as people from the majority community in Kashmir declare quite shamelessly, if I may add. Then there is interpretive denial, which means which twists the meaning of the event, as the Indian government and media so often do. You remember how Barkha Dutt blamed Kashmiri Hindus for their plight? That is interpretive denial. And third, there is partial acknowledgement. And partial acknowledgement is perhaps the most insidious form of denial because it appears to be sympathetic to the victim's cause. So this bill introduced by Vivek Tankha is in the mold of this third kind of denial by partial acknowledgement. What it does is that it asks for a recognition of genocide at one place, while its spirit is that of denial. This is extremely important to understand because the reality of Kashmir is so dark that it is easy for the government to mislead people into believing that the government is serious about the civilizational reclamation of Kashmir. For example, a day after Rahul Bhatt was killed, there was suddenly this news of his killers being eliminated. The media also informed us that these killers were associated with Pakistan. So all the outrage and anger was quelled in one single shot. And at the same time, it was also very beautifully conveyed that the locals are not hostile to the Hindus. And it is always the evil Pakistan that is to blame. That is, incidentally, the trope of Kashmiriyat, which was invoked. A fairy tale about harmony and love between Kashmiri Hindus and Muslims. Vivek Tankha's bill also invokes Kashmiriyat quite directly. And for those who can see, it's a clear giveaway of genocide denial. As I explained earlier, partial acknowledgement of genocide is actually its denial. Let me explain how. The case for genocide is established in 10 stages. The first is classification, dividing people into us and them. In Kashmir, it was obviously Muslim and Hindu. Second is symbolization, distinguishing people by color, dress, marks, etc. For example, skull caps or burqa can be used to symbolize insiders, and similarly, tilak or kalava for outsiders. Till here, there is nothing alarming because classification and symbolization are part of normal social interaction. The third is discrimination, the third step of genocide. And the dominant group uses law, custom, and political power to deny the rights of other groups. In Kashmir, it was common practice to deny admission to Hindus in educational institutions or government service because of our religious identity. So that was discrimination. Fourth is dehumanization. One group denies the humanity of the other group. Members of the outgroup are equated with animals, vermin, insects, or diseases. Things like Indian dogs go back. Stone worshippers are disgusting. So this is dehumanization. What these statements do is that they dehumanize the other to overcome the normal human aversion to murder. The fifth is organization. Genocide is always organized, usually by the state, often using militias to provide deniability of state responsibility. In 1990, the Chief Minister of J&K and the country's Home Minister, the government-controlled media, and of course the terrorist groups were all complicit in the act of Hindu genocide, as is so beautifully depicted in the Kashmir Files. The sixth is polarization. Extremists drive the groups apart. Hate groups broadcast polarizing propaganda, and motivations for targeting a group are indoctrinated through mass media. So in Kashmir, we had local newspapers carrying ads and stories asking Hindus to convert, leave or die. And we had pamphlets all over the place and so on. The seventh stage is preparation. Plans are made for genocidal killings. They often use euphemisms to cloak their intentions, such as referring to their goals as ethnic cleansing, purification, or azadi. They build armies, buy weapons, and train their troops and militias. For years in Kashmir, our neighbors and colleagues were sending their young men across the border to Pakistan to be trained in arms, and they would come back as soldiers of their faith, etc. So that's preparation. The eighth stage is persecution. Victims are identified and separated out because of their ethnic or religious identity. Death lists are drawn up. And it was very common in the late 80s for prominent Hindu men to be told that they were on this thing called the hit list and that their days were numbered. Ninth stage is extermination. It is extermination to the killers because they do not believe their victims to be fully human. Rape is used as a tool of war. Dismemberment happens. Girija Tikku was famously cut into pieces on the saw, as shown in Kashmir Files. Neelkant Ganju was killed. Tikalal Taplu was shot dead in broad daylight. And the list goes on and on, as we know. The final stage, the 10th, is denial of genocide. This final stage lasts throughout and always follows genocide. It is among the surest indicators of further genocidal massacres. The perpetrators deny that they have committed any crimes and often blame what happened on the victims. They block investigations of the crimes and continue to govern until driven from power by force, when they flee into exile. So that is the 10 stages of genocide for you. If it is not clear yet, let me state it bluntly. The Kashmir Files has done its job of showing the truth of Kashmir. A film cannot do more than connecting people emotionally to the cause. But there is a huge risk that heightened emotions bring, which is that the emotions can be weaponized to harm the very cause that they stand for. This private members bill and all political posturing for truth and reconciliation and restorative justice do just that. They hijack the emotional energy generated by the film and mislead people into believing that the political establishment cares for Kashmiri Hindus. They don't. Because if they did, the Panun Kashmir's genocide and atrocities prevention bill would have been tabled in the parliament 2 years ago when it was first brought out. As India is a contracting party to the United Nations Convention on Prevention and Punishment of Crime of Genocide 1948, it is obligatory on the part of the Union of India to enact a law in India to ratify its commitment. The Genocide and Atrocities Prevention Bill by Panun Kashmir is a step in that direction, and it forces the Indian government to recognize all the 10 stages of genocide that Kashmiri Hindus have undergone, thereby making it imperative by law for the government to prevent jihad from erupting in other parts of India. The bill is not a favor that you will do or the government will do to the Kashmiri Pandits. It is a shield for your own women and children. Read it, share it, and don't fall for media bites and government propaganda all the time.